Okay, I'm going to start with the final review and go through that, and if there are questions, I can answer those. All right. So we'll start at the beginning, just simplifying when we have to evaluate expressions. So we want to watch out for our order of operations rules. So for number 1, we want to find the absolute value, so it'll be 6. Then we're still multiplying by -7, and then plus 3 cubed, which we know is 27. So then we have to do the multiplying before we're going to add 27. So we'll get -42 plus 27. And we're going to take the sign of that big number, and we'll get negative. So that simplifies to -15. All right, the next section is our equations. So we want to use the inverse operation. So for something like 5, to get v by itself, we want to add 10 to both sides. I just want to make sure it, so we get v is equal to -10. And you can always check your answer by plugging v back in. For our fractions, if we have to deal with fractions like 10, 13, or 14, still want to solve for the variable, you can go about this one of 2 ways. You can either clear the fraction first by multiplying everything by 8, and so everything gets multiplied by 8, even the 11. So we get p plus 88 is equal to 72. And if you subtract 88 from both sides, we will get p is equal to negative. Oh, I don't know what's about. Sorry. It's going to be, uh-oh, I erased too many. Where did I get that? All right. You can plug it in. You could also subtract 11 first and then multiply by 8 on both sides, and you'd still get the same answer. For questions like 15, you'll just distribute first, and then to get rid of your parentheses, and then you're good to go. Next up, we'll go to the next page. Let me erase some of my old stuff here. Oop. Okay. You can do something like 21. You just got to be careful with your positive and negative signs. you'll distribute -7, so it's -7x minus 42 equals -x plus 12. You want to get x by itself, so you can move everything to the left every time, or you can move the smaller one, doesn't matter. Just as long as you stay consistent, and you'll get -6x. And then you can also, you can do it in one step or two, you can add 42. So for questions about proportions, erase this really quick. It's a different question. Stuff going on here. Let's do some erasing. So for our proportions, use the butterfly. That's what your teacher calls it. We're cross multiplying. So that just means 2 times 8 will be equal to 4 times x. So 4x is equal to 16. 4x is equal to 4. With something like 30, you are still going to cross multiply because it is, you have fractions, you have proportions here. So now it's going to be 10 times the quantity n plus 3, because that's all locked together, equals 4 times the quantity n plus 11. And we want to distribute. And 10 n plus 30 equals 4 n plus 44. So you subtract 4n from both sides. We're going to do it all in one step and see how that goes. And then you can also, since you want to get n on the left side in this case, and then you can just get rid of 30 on that side. So that's gone, and that's gone. So that'll leave you with, I'm going to go in this direction, 6n equals, and then 44 minus 30. Right, and then you want to divide by 6, and your answer should be a simplified fraction. So 14 over 6 simplifies into 7 over 3. Just got to make sure that you simplify all of your answers. The one thing that's important about a question like 26 is this negative here. That portion right there is either -7 over n or 7 over -n, but not -7 over -n. So you gotta be careful about that. Okay, then the next page goes over absolute value equations. So things to look out for are you're gonna to make 2 equations. So I was like thinking, okay, I've got those 2 absolute value bars right there. So I'm gonna make 2 separate equations. I've got one that tells me k minus 2 is equal to +4. And then the other one, k minus 2. So everything inside of the absolute value stays the same, equals -4. So we're talking about our distances. So we're either traveling 4 units one direction, 4 units in another. You solve for k, so we'll add 2 to both equations because that's what we'll have to do. We'll get 2 different answers. We will get that k is equal to 6. And the other value of k that will make this equation true is -2. And again, you can always check if you plug in 6 for k or -2 for k, and take the absolute value, you will be able to get 4. For absolute value equations, like 35, you have to make sure that your absolute value is by itself before you split it. So we want to divide by 6 first because it's like 6 times the absolute value. So to get rid of that, we want to divide by 6 on both sides. And then we can go ahead, make our 2 equations where we will get 1 minus 7x equals 13 and 1 minus 7x equals -13. So we'll get -7x equals 12 by subtracting 1 from both sides, and x is equal to -12/7. And then for the other one, let's split these up. And the other one, we solve for x and get -7x, because we're subtracting 1 from both sides, equals -14, and x equals 2. So we're going to get our 2 solutions. And again, I always just see those absolute value bars, and I'm going to get 2 equations. Then go on to, some of these done already, nice. Let's erase some of the stuff I don't want to see. Okay, so for solving and graphing our inequalities, the one thing we have to watch out for is multiplying or dividing by a negative. Because if we divide by a negative, we have to flip the inequality. So if I look at something like 39, I need to solve for k, and that means I'm going to divide by -4 on both sides. I'll get k and 21, and I have to make sure that I flip the inequality sign. So it was a less than, so now it'll be k is greater than 21, and that means I will have an open circle at 21 because we don't have an equal to, so it's just greater than. And it'll be greater than, so I'm going to show it here in that direction. So the most important thing with our inequalities is we're watching out for that. Other questions with inequalities, if it gets a bit more complicated, we still follow the same thing. We want to distribute and we'll get 20 plus 5x is greater than or equal to 55. We want to subtract 20 from both sides. And I get 5x is greater than or equal to 35. So x is greater than or equal to 7. So closed circle because we have an equal to. So I find 7 in the closed circle. There we go. And greater than, so we shade. All right, with our fractions again, we just gotta be careful. You can add 2 to both sides. It's probably nice. And then b over 9 is greater than or equal to 2. And multiply by 9 over 1 so that the 9s can cancel. And we get b is greater than or equal to 18. So same situation. Closed circle at 18. Oof, that was a big one. Let's go a little smaller. And greater than, so we're shading this way. All right. When we have compound inequalities, just like if we had just most of those sections, oh, that's not good. We want to subtract 6 from all sections. So this one's an and, so I'm going to subtract 6 from all parts, and we get -3 and 4. And when we have this compound inequality, we're saying that -3 is less than n, which is less than 4. So n is in between -3 and 4. A number that makes this true would be something that's literally in between -3 and +4. So I find -3, and I'm going to have an open circle at that place because we don't have an equal to symbol here. We're going to have an open circle at -3. And then at 4, we have an equal to, so it's less than or equal to. So that means we're going to have a closed circle at 4. And we're going to shade all the numbers that are in between because n is in between -3 and 4. So our solution could be one of those numbers. Then with an or, so our and are going to be in between. And our or, in most cases, they're going to be going in opposite directions. So it could be open or closed, but opposite. So for or, for 58, we want to take each of these inequalities individually. And so we're going to divide by -6. So we get n, and 0 divided by -6 is 0. But we did divide by a negative number. Right, we divided by -6 here, and -6. So that actually means we are going to flip the inequality sign. And we still have or. And now we're gonna divide by -6 again. So divide by -6. So we'll get n, and then we'll also get -3, but we need to flip that inequality sign, so it's less than or equal to. So that means that when I graph it, I'm going to go to 0 and -3. So 0, and that's going to be an open circle, and -3, and in this case that's going to be closed circle. And I'm going to shade in between. Oh, sorry, it's or. So I want something n is greater than 0, so all the numbers greater than 0 are in this direction. And all the numbers less than or equal to -3 are in this direction. So there we go. So we just take those individually. And in this case, they went in different directions. Okay, absolute value inequality. That means we're going to have two inequalities in this symbol. We've got a greater than, so it's greater. So we'll have an or in between our inequalities. So it's going to be x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 8. And then or x plus 4 is less than or equal to -8. So we flip the inequality and change the sign. And then we'll get x. So x is greater than or equal to 8. 8 minus 4, sorry. So 4. Then we'll get x is less than or equal to -12. And it's or. So we'll be going in opposite directions. We'll find 4. Closed circle. We'll find -12. Closed circle. And we'll shade in the other directions. There we go. I should have been doing that a long time ago. All right. Then the next page, slope. Rise over run. So how much did we go up versus how much did we go over? So we went up this many, and we went over this many. So we count. We went up 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. If I counted that right, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we've got positive slope, so my slope is rise. How much I rose? 6. 5. Positive slope goes up from left to right. Negative slope goes down from left to right. And then we always have our flat ones, you know, our 0 slope and up and down undefined slope. Okay. Finding the slope, 2 points, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It's going to be 8 minus 1 over -1 minus a -19. So 7 over. And then negative and negative, I'll make it a positive. So you will get 18 over 18. So that's your slope. Okay. Parallel lines have the same slope. So the slope of a line that would be parallel is -6 over 5. Then for perpendicular slope, It's opposite reciprocal. So that actually means you take 3/2, -3/2 and flip it, so it's 2/3, and we change the sign. Write the equation in slope-intercept form. This is kind of like the gateway questions. So slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So in this case, the slope is negative because it's going down from left to right, so it's negative. You went down 1 and over how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. And the y-intercept is -3. So y is equal to -1/4 x minus 3. So that's how you write the equation of that line in slope-intercept form. If you have it in standard form and you want to go to slope-intercept form, so we've got standard form here. We want to subtract 5x from both sides. You basically want to get y by itself. And we always want to put the 5x in front, then divide by 4, and everything gets divided by 4. So y is equal to -5/4 x minus 4. If you had that negative for 84, you probably just want to go -1 here, and when you subtract 4x from both sides, you'll get -1y is equal to -4x plus 8, and you have to remember that that y has to be by itself, so you divide by -1 everywhere. So that helped you change the sign. So going standard form is going to be important. Then the next section slope-intercept form, but we are given a point and a slope. So we want to eventually get to y equals mx plus b, but we aren't there just yet. We are given a point and a slope, so we go into point-slope form first. So it's y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So that's where we want to start. So it's y minus 0 is equal to -4, and then x. And it's minus a -1. But then with a minus and a minus, that'll be plus. And then you got to distribute. And this 0 just goes away because y minus 0 is 0. It's just y. So it's -4x. And then -4 times a +1. So if you have a point and a slope, you go into point-slope form first, and then you're going to distribute. If you have 2 points, you'll still need a slope, but you don't have a y-intercept. But you could go, just like we did for 89, go from point-slope form once you know what the slope is. So figuring out the slope first is -5 minus 4, so y2 minus y1 over x2, -1 minus x1. So -9 over -3. So our slope is +3. Okay. So we get a +3. So then it's y minus 4 Okay, that's a y. Oof. Y minus 4. And our slope is now 3, and then x minus 2. Now, we're still trying to go to slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And we've got our y that I'm going to rewrite here because it's been through too much. And we need to distribute, and we'll get y minus 4 equals 3x minus 6. You got to add 4 to both sides. And we'll get y equals 3x minus 2. Okay. I have to erase that pretty soon. All right, the next questions also follow that same line, but now we're talking about parallel versus perpendicular lines. And we remember parallel lines have the same slope. So once we know something about our slope, we'll be able to include that new point that it has to go through. So I'm going to erase this top section so I have some space. Okay, and we are trying to write the equation. So for 93, write the slope-intercept form of the equation. So eventually, we'll still want to get to y equals mx plus b. That's like the final step, but we need to start in point slope form because we've got a point, -5, 0, that we have to go through, and a slope, because our slope, our line has to be parallel to this line, so we want the same slope. Because they said parallel. So it's going to go y minus 0 is equal to -3/5. Because we want the same slope, because we want a parallel line, x plus 5. And then lucky for us, it's y minus 0, so y minus 0 is just y, and then -3/5 x minus, and I've seen a lot of different things that happen when you multiply these, but -3/5 times 5 is like -3/5 times 5 over 1. The 5's will cancel because you're cross canceling, it's on the top and the bottom. And that will leave you with just this -3 here, so it's minus 3. So that's the equation of your line in slope-intercept form. That is through your point -5, 0, and it's parallel. The next thing, let's erase this and look at perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines do not have the same slope. They have opposite reciprocal slopes. So the slope here that's perpendicular is going to be -3/5. And we've got a point, 5, -3, so it goes y plus 3. So it's y minus a -3, so y plus 3. And then -3/5 our slope. And then x minus 5. So we distribute, and then we'll deal with that 3 next to y. And the 5's cancel, so we get +3, and then subtract 3. And I'm going to move up here, and I get y is equal to -3/5 x, and -3 and +3 canceled. So that's it. That's our equation. That just means we have a y-intercept of 0. This would be kind of like plus 0 if you were trying to graph it. So y-intercept is at 0, 0, and then you have your slope. Alrighty, graphing. So for graphing, we want to start with the y-intercept, but unfortunately I like seeing it in slope-intercept form, so it's just like a little easier to pick out all the important info. So I want to solve for y, so I subtract 4x from both sides, so I get negative y is equal to negative 4x plus 1, and then I divide by negative 1 everywhere because this guy has a little 1 in front of it. And I get y, oop, that was not a y, that was just a curve. And we'll get y is equal to 4x, positive 4x, because it's negative 4 divided by negative 1, and then minus 1. So I start at the y-intercept, negative 1. That's as close as I'm going to get. And then rise 4, and then run, because it's like over 1. So I'm going to go up 4, and then over 1 to my next point. And then I can draw my line. These are not going to be straight, but hey, we know where they're supposed to go. And another point would be you could go down 4 and to the left 1, and that's still part of your line. All right, so graphing's okay as long as it's in slope-intercept form. There's a lot more graphing, so and it's already in slope-intercept form, so I'm going to go to the next page or section. I think definitely next section. All right. Solving your system by graphing. Okay, so solving your system by graphing just means you graph. Let's take out some stuff here. This is from last time. Okay. So you're going to solve your system by graphing. So each line, you graph them separately. So your y-intercept for the first one is at negative 2. Then you either go down 6 over 1 to the right, or you go up 6 and then over 1 to the left. So let's do that one just one more time. Close enough. All right, so we know where it is. And we draw our line. Okay. And the other line we'll draw with a different color. And we'll find our y-intercept at 3, and we're going down 1 over 1 every time. These both have negative slope. And the reason I knew to go both up and down is so that I can figure out where these lines meet. Like I'm gonna hopefully have an exact point where they meet. And the solution to the system is where those lines intersect. And it is at negative 1. Oh, negative 1, negative 4. Or negative 1, positive 4. Jeez, whoa, positive 4. There we go. So the solution to your system is negative 1, 4. Okay, the next little thing we can look at before we go on is what happens when these lines do not meet. You graph them and you realize that they have the same slope. that just means that we're going to have no solution to our system. There is no point that these two share, basically. That would make both of them true. Then the next page, so all of this would just be graph and then find where the lines meet. And you just got to be careful with your positive and negative slopes. Solve by substitution. I honestly, with substitution, you look for the variable that is by itself already and has a positive 1 coefficient. So I see y right there has a positive 1 coefficient. So if I solve for y, I'll get positive 2x. And I'll also get plus 10 because I added 2x to both sides. All right, so then that y. So wherever I see y in the other equation, I'm going to plug in 2x plus 10. So the negative x here isn't y, so I leave it alone, and it's minus 6. And that 6 is multiplied to y, so I substitute. So instead of having y there, I have 2x plus 10. And I'm going to distribute, and I'll be able to solve for x. So I get negative x minus 12x minus 60 equals negative 21. And that's a 1 right here, so it's like negative 13x minus 60 equals negative 21 and negative 13x. And I'm going to add 60 to both sides. Equals 39, and that's a positive 39. So x in this case is negative 3. Then I have to plug this back in to figure out what y is going to be, because in my equation I have both x and y, so I should have values for both x and y. So I've got y is equal to 2 times, now not x, but negative 3. I'm subbing it back in. Plus 10. So it's negative 6 plus 10. And y is equal to positive 4. So the solution is a point. It's like these are two lines, and where are they going to meet? They're going to meet at negative 3, comma positive 4. So your solution is a point. And if you were to plug it back into both of these equations, you would figure out, you'd get a true statement for both, so you know that they are solutions. If you have any specific questions or certain type of question you want to ask, or you want to see worked out, you can. I've gone through like graphing, slope-intercept form, point-slope form, all that stuff, and I'm working my way down to the rest of the semester, which was like elimination, word problems, all that stuff. I think I skipped a section. Hold on. New. Move. Okay. Anyway, we can talk about solving by elimination. If you have x and y, their coefficients aren't close to positive 1, you can't substitute. You can multiply both equations by values that help you eliminate one of the variables. So in this case, I probably want to eliminate let's see. whichever one has a different sign, but is this the bottom? Oh, this is another page. That's why I skipped a page. Let's see. Yeah, okay, here we go. Here we go. These are nicer. Okay, solving by elimination. We want to multiply one or both of these equations by a value so you can cancel out either x or y. I want to cancel out y because these are smaller numbers and they have the same sign. They're both negative, so I'm going to multiply one of these by a negative number, so they'll have opposite signs. So I want to multiply by -2 for the top equation and 3 for the bottom. And that'll help me cancel out y. So I'll get positive 16. So everything gets multiplied, like all of them. So I get positive 16x, then positive 6y, and positive 24. Then you multiply by positive 3, and we'll get 33x. And negative 6y, and then we'll get negative 24. And what that'll help us do is that once we add our equations here, we'll notice that our y's, negative 6y and positive 6y, will cancel, which is what we wanted. And then we'll add, and we will get 49x. The y's are gone, equals 0. So I divide by 49. So x is equal to 0, because it's like $0 divided by, cut into 49 pieces is still $0. So x is 0, then you gotta plug it back into the original. So we're gonna take -8, plug in 0 for x. Then you'll have -3y equals -12. So the only thing that changes was that x. So anything times 0, 0. So now I have -3y equals -12. So I divide by -3. So y is equal to 4. So my solution is the point 0, positive 4. Any questions on any of the reviews that you have? Please let me know. I'm just going through an old review from I don't know when, but it goes over the same material. So please let me know. Okay, to make sure I go through everything, I'll go through these. Graphing, solving. Okay, so these are the same in that you have to still graph this, but when you have your inequalities, you will be shading. So we got to figure out where we're shading. We'll start with this color. And we'll start at +3, because that's the y-intercept for that first inequality. And then we're rising to run 1. Our slope is 2/1. And I like going kind of across this so then I can figure that out. And that inequality sign is not an equal to, so these are dashed. So I'll just do little dashes in between. And then I also have to shade. If I see an inequality, I will be shading. So it says y is greater than. So I shade above my line. Then I go to the next one. Shade there. And I'll go -2. And my slope is 1/3. So up 1/3. And then I also want to go in the other direction just to like cover everything. And this one also doesn't have to have an equal to symbol, so that's a dashed line. And it's greater than. So my overlapping shaded region is actually the solution in these ones. It's like the part where I see both red and green, that's my solution. So it's like all of this. That's my solution. It's where I see both red and green. Okay, more of those. If you need more of those, let me know. Then positive exponents, these guys. So we just did these on the last test. I see 2n² and 3n², so I get 6. Those multiply and I get n to the 4th. So I have 2 n's being multiplied, and then I have 2 more. This is kind of like 1p, so it's going to be 2, and I've got p times p, which is p squared. Negative exponents, we'll deal with those probably with 128 and 129. If you have anything to the 0 power, that's just 1. So now it's just 2x cubed y to the -1 power. And what I usually say is if I have a negative exponent, I change the sign, cross the line and change the sign. So the 2x cubed doesn't have a negative exponent, so it stays in the numerator. But then this y has y to the -1, just swings it down. So it's going to be y to the first in the denominator. And since I can't cancel any of these, that's just it. So watch out for the negative. How does it become -1? It is a -1 from the actual question. And I was able to cancel like this part just because it was all to the 0 power, just that giant chunk was to the 0 power. But since it's a -1 here, in the original problem, I want to change it so all my answers are positive exponents. Did that answer the question? Okay. And same thing with 129. So now it's like, what this says is like -1 n to the 0 for that first part. I'm not even going to look at the second part. N to the 0 just becomes a 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. But there was -1 being multiplied to it, so it's going to be -1 times, and then m to the -3 power. And now we've got our negative exponent. That's going to cross the line and change the sign, so it's going to go in the denominator, and it's -1 over m to the 3rd power. Next section. I'm going to skip that for right now and graph these guys. I think I have some of this filled out. Let's edit I'll do this guy. So you make a table. I think those are enough values to kind of figure out where it's supposed to go. -1, so -1 becomes the exponent. So it's like 4 times 2 to the -1. Negative exponent means what goes down into the denominator, so it's actually going to be 4 over 2, which is just 2. So it goes -1. So I go over -1, and I'm going to go up 2. Then 0. What I'm doing is I'm taking 4 times 2 to the 0 power, but anything to the 0 power is 1, so just get 4. Let's separate this as, there we go. And then the last one is 4 times 2 to the 1 power. So 2 to the 1 is just 2, so I get 8. So let's fill it in. So we go 0, 0, 4, okay, those are smaller. All right, and then we go 1, comma 8. So we can see that it kind of curves up from here and grows exponentially. So it's an exponential growth because our B2 is bigger than 1. More graphing, and then I think this might be close to the last ones. For these, we do a little bit of reading. So we've got an equation to model our corruption score, where a corruption score in GDP. So we are looking at our equation where X is corruption score, that's X, and GDP is Y. So what does the slope represent? It represents, in this case, our GDP over our corruption score. Which just means that for every 438, because that's our slope, right? For 438 dollars, we go up 1 unit of our corruption score. And then the y-intercept is our GDP per capita at a score of 0. Which is not found here because we don't have a country that's on this scale. It's highly corrupt, I guess. Okay, then if we answer the next ones, it just says, okay, according to the model, what would be the GDP per capita of a country with a corruption score of 24? So we can estimate that because we have an actual equation. We have that y is equal to 438x minus 6,767. So we just plug it in. So we'll take y equals 438 times 24, because x is our corruption score, then minus 6,760. So let's figure that out. 438 times 24 minus 6,760. So what would the GDP per capita? So it's 3,7. And that's so if they give you a value of x, you plug it in to find the value of y. All right. I just did another one like that. Oh, I'm done. Oh. If you have any sections that you want to go over, please let me know. I think I went over all the sections. If you want to go back through earlier parts of the video, I went over like our equations, our inequalities, slope, point slope form, slope intercept form, all that stuff. Do you guys have any questions? Okay. All right. Thanks. This will be posted as a YouTube video, and you can also just like rewatch this if you come back to it, if you have other review questions. Good night. Thank you.